Okay, today we live in an age of endless noise, a world where every second invites a new notification, a new debate, a new reason to speak before we truly think. We scroll, we react, we respond, but rarely do we pause. Silence has become a stranger, mistaken for weakness or worse, emptiness. Yet in the teachings of the Stoics, silence is not an absence. It is presence itself. Welcome to Stoic Dhamma, a space where we slow down, breathe, and rediscover the wisdom that time has not erased. Today we explore why silence is strength, and how through stillness you can find self-discipline, clarity, and peace. This is not the silence of retreat, but of power, a silence that listens before it acts, that observes before it judges, that transforms chaos into calm. From here, let us begin the journey inward, the Stoic path to strength through stillness. There is a kind of strength that doesn't shout, doesn't compete, doesn't demand to be seen. It lives quietly beneath the surface, steady and unshaken. The Stoics understood this strength. They called it stillness, not the absence of sound, but the presence of mind. To be still is to return to yourself, to meet the world without noise, and to let wisdom, not impulse, shape your response. In ancient Rome, where the roar of crowds filled the air and ambition echoed through marble halls, Marcus Aurelius found his peace not in victory, but in silence. Each morning before ruling an empire, he would retreat inward. "Nowhere," he wrote, "can a man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." Stillness was not an escape. It was the discipline of attention, the art of choosing what deserves your energy and what does not. Today, the empire looks different. It is the digital world, a realm that never sleeps, where the constant flow of information demands instant reaction. Opinions, arguments, and noise compete endlessly for your attention. Yet the Stoic principle remains timeless. When you stop reacting to the outer world, you begin mastering the inner one. Silence, then, is not withdrawal, but strength, a way to reclaim clarity from chaos. In Stoic philosophy, stillness is not mere quietude. It is a deliberate pause, a conscious act of restraint. True freedom begins when you no longer allow external events to dictate your inner state. In silence, you rediscover the space between stimulus and response, the power to choose your own reaction. Imagine sitting by a lake at dawn. The surface is still, reflecting the sky like glass. Then a stone drops, ripples spread, distorting the reflection. This, the Stoics would say, is the mind. When disturbed by impulse or anger, its clarity fades. But when calm, it reflects truth. The practice of silence is the discipline of keeping that inner lake still, to see reality without distortion. Seneca wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. The noisy mind invents stories about failure, judgment, control. Yet in silence, those illusions dissolve. The Stoics trained themselves to step back from thought, to observe it as one watches clouds drift across the sky. They knew the voice in your head is not always your ally. Silence teaches you to listen beyond it, to the quiet current of reason beneath emotion. Epictetus taught that mastery begins with restraint. Be silent, he advised, for it is not the one who speaks much who is wise, but the one who listens rightly. To listen rightly is to hear life as it is, not as you wish it to be. It requires humility, the recognition that truth does not need your commentary. The world reveals itself only to those who do not interrupt it. But silence is not easy. It forces you to face yourself. When outer noise fades, the inner noise grows louder: doubt, restlessness, fear. This is why most avoid stillness. It exposes what distraction hides. Yet for the Stoics, this confrontation was strength. Through silence, they refined perception, tempered desire, and acted with purpose instead of impulse. Why does stillness hold such power? Because in silence, you cease to be a prisoner of reaction. You gain the freedom to observe, to understand, and to act wisely. Every act of courage begins in that quiet space between thought and action. Think of a sculptor before marble. The form already exists within. The task is simply to remove what does not belong. Silence does the same. It strips away anger, ego, and noise, revealing only what is essential. This is the Stoic art of self-discipline, not to add more, but to uncover truth. Modern life tempts us to believe that constant expression equals progress. We measure our worth by how much we post, reply, or speak. But the Stoics would remind us, motion is not movement, and sound is not sense. They would say, pause, observe, and let silence teach what words cannot. Only in quiet can you hear the rhythm of your own reasoning, the whisper of conscience too often drowned out by the crowd. Silence also carries moral weight. The Stoics practiced it as an ethical discipline. To speak less is to harm less, to judge less, to give others the dignity of being heard. Silence nurtures empathy and patience. It reminds us that wisdom often wears the face of humility. Not every truth must be spoken, and not every reaction must be expressed. Stillness is strength because it anchors you when the world demands a storm. It is the calm eye within life. Hurricane, the place where perception clears and reason steadies. When you rest in silence, you stop seeking validation in noise and begin to understand yourself instead of striving to be understood. Imagine a moment of conflict, when anger rises and words rush forward. The Stoic practice is simple: pause, do not react. In that pause, the flame loses air, and what remains is clarity. The silence between stimulus and response is where character is built. You do not suppress emotion. You master it by refusing to let it command you. Eastern philosophy says, the still mind is the ruler of the storm. The Stoics would agree. When silence becomes habit, stillness becomes home. You carry calm into conversation, work, and hardship, and over time, it turns into quiet confidence, the kind that needs no audience. So ask yourself, can you truly listen to your own mind? Can you hear your thoughts without reacting to them? The Stoics believe that in silence you find awareness, not through speech but through presence. When the world's noise fades, the voice of reason remains, timeless and unshaken. This is the essence of Stoic philosophy. The quietest voice carries the deepest truth. In learning to be still, you master not the world, but yourself. And from here we journey deeper, into the roots of an ancient wisdom where silence became the foundation of the Stoic mind. Long before the modern world discovered mindfulness, before psychology gave words to emotion and control, the Stoics had already mapped the terrain of inner quiet. To them, silence was not simply restraint, but a philosophical foundation, the alignment of the inner world with the harmony of nature itself. In the bustling marketplaces of Greece and the marble forums of Rome, life overflowed with argument, rhetoric, and ambition. Yet amid that clamor rose a quieter voice, the Stoics, who believed that wisdom begins where speech ends and reflection begins. For Epictetus, silence was a discipline of perception. Born a slave, he learned that freedom does not depend on circumstance but on the mind's command over itself. Silence, to him, was the gateway to that command. Only in stillness could one discern what lies within our control and what does not, the very heart of Stoic philosophy. When teaching his students, Epictetus urged them to speak little and only when necessary. To argue, he said, is to waste energy on proving rather than improving. Observation, not persuasion, was the true strength. Through quiet attention, one perceives the world as it is, not as the ego desires. This, he taught, is the essence of education, to see rightly before daring to speak. Seneca, the Roman statesman, saw silence as a safeguard against passion. In a world where words could determine life or death, he understood that silence was not emptiness, but power withheld. If you wish to be respected, he wrote, learn to be silent. To speak less was to give thought time to mature. Silence refined judgment and turned impulse into intention. Seneca viewed words as seeds, capable of growing truth or chaos depending on when they were sown. Words spoken in haste reveal a mind ruled by emotion. Words spoken with care reveal a mind at peace. Thus, silence became the soil in which reason took root. Then came Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor. Surrounded by command and counsel, he faced the endless noise of empire, soldiers, senators, flatterers. Yet in his meditations, he often reminded himself, "Let your words be few, and your spirit calm." For Marcus, silence was the practice of humility. A ruler surrounded by echoes must learn to hear truth in the quiet of his own mind. Stillness allowed him to distinguish duty from desire, justice from pride. To him, silence was not withdrawal but wisdom in action. The pause before virtue speaks. Despite their different stations in life, the Stoics shared one conviction. The quiet mind mirrors the order of the cosmos. They saw the universe as a living, rational whole, governed by logos, the divine reason. To live well was to live in harmony with this order. Noise, whether of the world or of the mind, disrupted that harmony. But in silence, the soul could realign with nature's calm and eternal rhythm. The Stoic path to silence, therefore, was not about rejecting speech but restoring balance. The wise speak when words serve reason. They remain silent when words serve ego. Silence became an act of virtue, the deliberate union of word and wisdom. Across time, echoes of this idea appear in other traditions. In ancient India, silence, mauna, was revered as communion with truth. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna reminds Arjuna that self-mastery begins with control of speech and thought. The Stoics walked a similar path, carrying the torch of reason through the quiet. Yet Stoic silence was never passive. It was preparation, the sharpening of perception before action. The Stoic did not withdraw from life but observed it with detachment, ensuring that action, when it came, was just and measured. Seneca warned, "A sword is useless in trembling hands." The same is true of speech. Words must be disciplined, or they wound the one who wields them. You can feel this restraint in their writing. Epictetus speaks in short, clear truths. Seneca's letters breathe between thought and expression, like a steady pulse. Marcus writes to himself in solitude, his sentences unfolding like ripples on still water, calm, deliberate, enduring. Their works were not written for applause, but for conscience. For the Stoics, silence was not isolation, but an inner condition. Stillness was portable, a sanctuary carried within. The Stoic could move through the marketplace, senate, or battlefield, yet remain undisturbed. Silence became the armor of the soul, invisible, impenetrable. Thus, silence evolved into a moral stance, to live and speak with intention. The Stoic did not speak to impress, but to express what was necessary and true. Each word carried weight because it emerged from stillness. As Marcus wrote, "Let your words be like the sound of a bell, brief, clear, and pure." Philosophically, this ideal connects to phronesis, practical wisdom. Wisdom to the Stoics was not abstract knowledge, but right action guided by reason. Silence was the foundation upon which wisdom could stand. Without stillness, thought dissolves into reaction. Without restraint, virtue turns into vanity. Through silence, the Stoic distinguished appearance from essence. In noise, truth hides. In quiet reflection, it emerges. Solitude, therefore, was not loneliness but purification, a polishing of the mind as mirror, so it could reflect the world faithfully. Silence was the cloth that made reflection possible. And even now, in a world louder than theirs, the Stoics speak clearly to us. They remind us that the compulsion to speak, to post, to prove, is not freedom but dependency. True freedom is choosing when to speak and when to remain silent. In silence, we reclaim our attention, our reaction, our peace. Through Epictetus, Seneca, and Marcus Aurelius, silence evolved from a private virtue into a universal principle, an architecture of the inner life. Within its quiet walls, the mind learns discipline, humility, and insight. It becomes a sanctuary where thought matures before meeting the world. This is the essence of the silent mind, not born from retreat but from mastery. It observes before acting, listens before speaking, and holds its peace not from fear but from strength. Silence, as the Stoics understood it, was never meant to be an escape. It was a discipline, a method for turning thought into controlled action. In stillness, the mind becomes clear. In clarity, the right action reveals itself. Stoicism was never a philosophy of words, but of deeds refined through awareness. To be silent, then, was to sharpen the sword of intention before it strikes. Epictetus once told his students that philosophy is not about saying fine things, but about living them. Silence, for him, was the bridge between knowledge and embodiment. It is easy to speak of patience, but far harder to practice it in the moment when anger tempts the tongue. Silence transforms that temptation into observation. It gives space for wisdom to step forward before impulse takes command. This is the essence of Stoic self-discipline, not suppression but selection. Knowing when to speak and when to remain silent is the highest form of freedom, the freedom to choose your response. Every pause becomes courage, every restraint, a quiet victory. The Stoic does not seek to mute life's noise but to orchestrate it into harmony. In today's world, buzzing offices, endless notifications, overlapping voices, silence is often mistaken for weakness. Yet for the Stoic, it is strength. To listen more than you speak is to perceive beyond words, to understand motives, fears, and truths hidden beneath them. You see clearly because you no longer defend your own noise. In the workplace, this stillness becomes strategy. The one who listens understands more. The one who reacts less errs less. By mastering silence, you develop discernment, a form of emotional intelligence rooted in patience. You speak when your voice adds value, not when your ego demands attention. Silence, then, becomes influence, not withdrawal. In relationships, silence transforms into compassion. To pause before replying, to listen without planning your next word, is to honor another's humanity. Arguments often start where silence should have been. Restraint creates space for truth to emerge. Many conflicts dissolve not through victory, but through understanding. Marcus Aurelius lived by this, reminding himself to hear without judgment, to respond without haste. Silence combined with empathy heals far more than it wounds. But the hardest silence is the one within. The Stoics saw the untrained mind as a restless chatterbox of fear, pride, and regret. Inner silence to them was mental hygiene. The rest the mind needs to renew its strength. Without it, thoughts turn toxic, feeding anxiety and confusion. To cultivate it, Stoics practice daily stillness. Begin your day in quiet reflection. No phone, no distraction. Breathe and let the mind settle like dust in water. This is not thinking but seeing, noticing what you carry before the world reshapes it. Throughout the day, practice pauses. When anger or worry rises, count to 3. Observe the feeling without reacting. Between impulse and action lies freedom, the moment of choice. At night, return to quiet reflection. Seneca urged his students to review each day with honesty. What did I do well? Where did I fall short? How can I improve tomorrow? This nightly practice, simple yet profound, transforms confusion into clarity. By writing, you confront yourself without judgment, turning mistakes into lessons and experiences into wisdom, polishing the mind as one would sharpen a blade for the next day. Through these practices, silence becomes rhythm. Morning calm, mindful pauses, evening reflection. It turns noise into awareness, reaction into wisdom. The Stoic silence is not emptiness but presence, a space where thought matures before becoming action, where the self learns mastery through stillness. In practicing these habits, silence becomes more than a pause. It becomes a rhythm. The morning quiet aligns your mind. The daytime pauses guard your reactions. The evening reflection restores balance. Through repetition, silence evolves into second nature, like a calm undercurrent that carries you through the turbulence of modern life. But Stoic silence is not void. It is filled with awareness, an active, alert state of being. Think of it as a musician's rest note, the pause that gives meaning to the melody. Without silence, there is only noise. Without restraint, there is only reaction. Through silence, you allow meaning to emerge. You give your life shape by deciding what deserves expression and what deserves release. In many ways, this practice is a rebellion against modern conditioning. Our culture rewards speed, instant replies, constant sharing, immediate gratification. But the Stoic knows that speed without reflection is drift. The one who pauses, listens, and acts deliberately moves not slower, but truer. Silence restores intention to a life otherwise scattered by noise. Through this discipline, the Stoic achieves not detachment from life, but depth within it. Silence turns moments of irritation into lessons of patience. It transforms conflicts into opportunities for empathy. It makes space for gratitude to grow, for peace to take root. And as these quiet habits accumulate, something profound happens. Your life begins to reflect the same stillness you practice. You may still face chaos, criticism, and uncertainty, but they no longer own you. In silence, you carry your own calm. You stop fighting every wave and learn instead to move with the tide. Each pause becomes a return to yourself, a reminder that peace is not found in changing the world, but in mastering your response to it. So start small. Begin tomorrow in silence. Let your first thoughts be your own. When irritation comes, breathe before reacting. When the day ends, write, not to impress, but to understand. These simple acts form the foundation of Stoic discipline. Observation before action, reflection before speech, silence before wisdom. This is how thought becomes strength, how stillness turns into motion without chaos. And slowly, through the quiet work of daily practice, the Stoic ideal takes root in your life. A self guided not by noise, but by understanding. From here, we step into the next layer, the stories and lessons of those who embodied this power, who turned silence into the source of greatness. True strength has never belonged to the loudest voice in the room, but to the calmest presence. The Stoics knew this well. That mastery of the self is the greatest victory a human can achieve. In the still mind resides a power untouched by chaos, a quiet force that leads not through domination, but through understanding. Silence, in this sense, is not retreat. It is leadership refined by wisdom. Throughout history, those who shaped the world did not always shout to be heard. Many led through calm, measured restraint. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king of Rome, stands as one of the most profound examples. As emperor, he ruled the vast Roman Empire amid wars, plagues, and political intrigue. Yet his private writings, now known as meditations, reveal not a conqueror obsessed with control, but a man who sought peace within himself before commanding others. Every night Marcus turned inward, writing reflections in silence to discipline his own thoughts. You have power over your mind, he reminded himself, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. His leadership was not born from pride or impulse, but from deliberate stillness, the kind that allowed him to see clearly when others panicked. The same silence that steadied his mind also steadied an empire. Marcus's example reminds us that the calm mind is not passive, it is precise. To pause before judgment is not hesitation, it is strategy. To listen before commanding is not weakness, it is wisdom. When you master silence, you no longer need to prove your strength. Your presence speaks for you. Fast forward 2 millennia, and the Stoic flame burns again in a modern voice. Ryan Holiday, the author of The Daily Stoic and Stillness is the Key. In a world driven by noise, Holiday translates ancient Stoicism into practical guidance for modern life, a call to action through quiet reflection. His message echoes Marcus Aurelius, that in stillness, we reclaim control of ourselves. Holiday's work is built on one essential insight, that silence is not about doing less, but about doing with purpose. The disciplined mind is not one that avoids noise entirely, but one that knows how to return to silence after the storm. Through journaling, mindfulness, and restraint, he reminds us that calmness is not an accident. It is a cultivated skill. This connection between Marcus and Holiday reveals a timeless truth. While the world changes, the human struggle remains the same. Our distractions have evolved, from the whispers of a Roman Senate to the endless notifications of a smartphone. But the medicine is still silence. It is stillness that allows us to pause, to reflect, and to act with integrity instead of impulse. In a society obsessed with visibility, where expression often replaces reflection, silence has become a rare form of rebellion. We are told to post, to comment, to react, constantly proving our existence through sound. Yet, as the Stoics knew, the truest self is revealed not in what we say, but in what we choose not to say. The silence of restraint is not emptiness. It is control over one's direction. Consider this. Every act of wisdom begins in a pause. The artist pauses before the brushstroke, the leader before the decision, the parent before the response. It is in that quiet breath that awareness blooms, the gap where clarity gathers its strength. In a world that rushes forward blindly, the one who can stand still, even for a moment, holds a power few understand. So how can we, in our time, live this wisdom? How can we translate Stoic silence into modern action? Begin by reclaiming small silences in your day. Step away from the noise, the screen, the conversation, the endless pull of opinions. Spend even a few moments with your own thoughts without judgment. Let them pass like clouds. The goal is not to suppress, but to see, to understand what drives you, what distracts you, and what truly matters. In your work, practice silence as a form of focus. Before sending that email, making that decision, or joining that debate, pause. Ask yourself, am I reacting or responding? The Stoic learns to delay reaction until it aligns with reason. This simple act transforms chaos into composure. In your relationships, use silence as empathy. Listen not just to words, but to emotions beneath them. Often, people do not need advice. They need space to unfold. When you offer that silence, you give them the rare gift of presence, a sanctuary in a world addicted to noise. And within yourself, cultivate a ritual of reflection. Each night, return to your inner world as Marcus Aurelius once did. Ask quietly, where did I act with wisdom today? Where did I lose control? What will I do better tomorrow? This dialogue with yourself is the essence of Stoic discipline, the gentle, persistent work of becoming your own teacher. Because silence is not just peace, it is power. It trains the mind to see without distortion, to act without haste, to live without waste. The Stoics were not monks detached from life. They were warriors of clarity, fighting not others but their own impulses. Their silence was not withdrawal, it was readiness. In an age overflowing with noise, silence has become the purest form of freedom. It is the space where creativity awakens, wisdom unfolds, and courage moves with quiet purpose. To embrace silence is to step beyond the need for approval, to trade noise for depth, distraction for clarity, and validation for the steady strength of inner virtue. So the next time you find yourself surrounded by noise, digital, emotional, or social, recall the quiet strength of those who mastered stillness. Remember Marcus Aurelius, writing by candlelight as the empire roared around him. Remember Ryan Holiday, turning ancient calm into modern wisdom. And above all, remember your own power to pause. For silence is not emptiness, but presence. The moment where clarity returns, where meaning takes shape, and where life at last begins to make sense. In the Stoic path toward self-discipline, silence is not escape. It is mastery. When we learn to quiet our words, we begin to govern our thoughts, and through this quiet strength, we shape the direction of our lives. True freedom, as the Stoics taught, is not found in speaking more, but in recognizing when restraint reveals greater power. If this reflection resonates with you, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Stoic Dhamma. Here we journey through the timeless wisdom of Stoic philosophy, discovering stillness amid noise, clarity amid confusion, and freedom within discipline. In our next episode, we'll explore Stoic reflections on failure and the art of self-improvement, uncovering how setbacks can become teachers and how calm persistence can turn adversity into inner strength. Join us as we continue walking the Stoic path toward peace, resilience, and self-mastery.